welcome. We are going to get started here in a moment. And we are just waiting for the live streams to propagate to all the different services because we go wide now. And okay, looks like we are there. All right, Amy, let me start the recording.
There you go. He's on top of it.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody, welcome. This is Seller Roundtable number 49. This is your host, Andy Arnott, with my co-host,
Amy Weiss.
And we are super excited to have Julia Ibrahim on today. She's going to show us all her super secret ninja accounting tips, tricks, and tactics. Thank you so much for being on, Julia.
Thank you for having me. So my name is Julia Ibrahim. I can start off by introducing myself. I am a certified public accountant, certified internal auditor. I'm a QuickBooks Advanced Pro Advisor and Zero certified as well. And my background is in government auditing. I've been auditing for New York State for about 9 years. And I'm currently running full service accounting and tax firm called All United Accounting and Tax. We specialize in e-commerce, and we help e-commerce businesses save money on taxes, utilizing some tax strategies. We help also to maintain compliance with federal and state government authorities. And most importantly, we'll get you accurate and financial data and projections to help your business grow and make the best management decisions on time and correctly.
Awesome.
Can I just throw in something here? You know, I found Julia, I'm lucky I found her because she does my accounting and she does some accounting for Andy and I too. And, you know, when I first started, I kind of went the affordable, the cheapest route I could go. Not that Julia is not affordable, but I went with a local accountant and I found that my tax returns were done completely incorrectly. None of my Amazon sales and things like that were actually properly accounted for. And so I started going through this process of talking to the people in my network saying, who do you use for accounting and what should you know, so I'm interviewing all these accountants and trying to figure things out. And Julia just did such a great job explaining everything to me. And then she also did a really great job of cleaning everything up. She not only had to redo all of my tax returns, submit letters to the IRS, all of that kind of stuff to keep me from getting audited, but she also realized that my prior year return was incorrect as well, and she corrected that. So she more than paid for herself just in the first time of utilizing her services. So that's my my glowing recommendation for Julia. She's been wonderful helping me kind of navigate all of this confusing accounting stuff as I start new businesses, as my business grows. You know, I'm always throwing crazy questions at her, which of course we'll get into during this podcast, but just wanted to add that in there, that she does a great job with my accounting. And I thank you so much, Julia, for cleaning things up for me.
Thank you, Amy.
So, all right, Julia, you ready to get grilled here? Just give us a little bit more background on, you give us some of your work stuff, like, background on, and you don't have to share this if you don't want to, but it's always nice to just, I love to hear about kind of, people's past, where you were born, where you live now, anything you did. You kind of mentioned your past jobs, college, school, kind of anything you want to mention for us and our listeners to get to know you a little bit better.
Oh, sure. Okay. So yeah, I come from Russia. I came in my teenage years. I went to college here. I went to college back in Russia, and then I transferred here. So I went. I completed my business degree. I completed my accounting degree. I got my CPA right away on the first try. And while working for the government, I also got my certified internal auditor license as well. So that's that. And then I right away started my accounting firm. It was kind of on a part-time basis for a while. And then it just grew and grew further. And that I just had to leave the job that I that I was doing as a government auditor. And my team, they all miss me, but but I had to do this because I like working for myself much better, and my firm is growing now much more than I anticipated in the last few years. And we've been specializing in e-commerce, and that's probably one of the reasons it's been growing exponentially, because a lot of e-commerce businesses are very not very aware of how the accounting is done for e-commerce specifically, and I think this industry needs more of e-commerce accountants.
Yeah,
Definitely.
we need a lot of help. I know that before I got my accountant, I was lost, and numbers are not my strong suit by any means. And as Amy mentioned, generally if you vet your accountant, you find a good one, like Julia, they're gonna more than pay for themselves almost every single time. So just keep that in mind. I know everybody's afraid of that expense, but in our case, yeah, it was the same kind of situation where, there was some changes that they made, kind of right away, like, making suggesting we become an S corp, and some other things that, made some big differences. So, to me, it's definitely worth at least looking into, but, highly suggest, especially if your business is growing and scaling, definitely something to consider. So, Julia, when did you kind of first hear about, Amazon and e-commerce, and why did you specialize it? Like, did you just see an opportunity there? Were you interested in it? Did you sell previously? Kind of why did you get into e-commerce specifically?
So I got into commerce for a few reasons. So it was kind of natural coming from, my husband used to sell on eBay. So I kind of knew that, and I knew it would be very hard. And the accounting, I was doing the accounting back then from the very beginning for our business, but uh, it didn't work out. So my husband stopped that because it's just not his thing. But that's something that gave me an idea to kind of start specializing in e-commerce. I used to do generalist accounting work, but that was right now I realize that I didn't know as much as I know now about the e-commerce accounting back then. So even though we were running a business, it was a struggle. Even though I was accountant too, and it was pretty high. So I kind of started to research more and try to help. And I got a lot of clients who needed help, and I built up my experience in that, and now I feel like I know how to deal with the accounting for e-commerce sellers, and that's why this is my specialty right now.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. The fact that, a lot of times, people will build or do things where they see that there's something lacking for themselves, right? So you guys figured out that, that accounting for e-commerce was difficult, and that there was an opportunity there. So that's awesome. I kind of did the same thing with, my app business, my software, Amazon, all those kinds of things as well. So I love that. One other quick thing I just realized, Amy, this is another podcast where we're all former government employees of some type.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yes, love it. Good old government. There's nothing teaching you like how to deal with the ups and the downs than working for government.
It's true. It's true.
And the red tape and yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And following the rules. We got to make sure we follow the rules.
Yeah.
So, just piggybacking on what Andy said about, making sure it's scary to hire an accountant because a lot of people don't want to deal with that expense. But I've given this advice so many times. Make sure, you guys, that even if you're at the very beginning of your business and you're not making enough money to pay an accountant or a bookkeeper yet, right? At least meet with one. At least meet with one, because you can meet one time. And, I know when I first did this, I kind of just met with one just to like, okay, should I be using QuickBooks? How do I set that up? Most accountants, even if you can't afford to pay them for bookkeeping or for anything, for the taxes, stuff like that, they'll at least, it's worth you paying one time to consult with them to get you on track and do a little DIY, and maybe you just have them look over things once a quarter, or maybe you have them look over things just at tax time, but then have them set you up for success from the beginning. So even our new business owners that are listeners, I really want to encourage you. This is one of the fundamentals of business that will really bite you later if you do it incorrectly. So make sure that you at least take the time to sit down with an accountant and just kind of learn the basic things that you should be doing. Get a consultation, understand, how your business should be set up. And even if you have to do it on your own, you have a little bit more empowerment and some knowledge to at least somewhat do it, not as good as they would, but better than you would just on your own had you not had that consultation. So, and speaking of that, Julia, I would love to ask you, what steps should you take to properly set up your e-commerce business when you're ready to start? Like, how do we start? How do we get there?
Okay, so if you are ready to start your business, I highly recommend that you would form a separate business entity, separate legal entities such as LLC or corporation. It's not a requirement, but it's highly recommended because you would set it up as a separate serious business from the start. It's just very important down the road for you. So the way what you set up, which entity type you would set up would depend on your goals, would depend on your budget, your plans, and what state you're in America, or if you're outside of America. So it all depends what type of entity you would need to set up. But it's highly recommended to have a separate entity for your business. Second step would be to get your EIN number. It's almost simultaneous with forming your business pretty much. So you can do it the same day. It's very important that when you get your EIN, you select the correct entity type and select the right business type, because you don't want to have it done corrected or need to be if it needs to be corrected in the future. So
and to get that EIN number, you just go to, if you're in the US, you just go to the irs.gov website and you put in, so this is after you file your entity and you've got your, your organization documents and okay, I'm a C Corp, that kind of thing, or you put that in there and literally in minutes, you are up and running and the IRS will give you an EIN. So it's very instantaneous. It doesn't cost anything, but that EIN then enables you to start a bank account for your business and file your taxes as a business and set up your resellers licenses and all of those things that you might need. So great tip there, Julia. Please continue.
Yes, so you already kind of dipped into it a little bit. So it's important that once you get formed your entity, it's important to have your business account opened. If you can't, because some businesses don't have opportunity to have a separate business account, at least have your personal account, bank account, separately set up exclusively for business. So it's not commingling funds with your personal funds, because it might cause you some issues down the road after that. And it's much harder to keep track of your numbers this way.
And if you are starting with a personal budget like I did, my business didn't have any credit in the beginning. So I had to take some of my personal funds and put it into a business bank account, and so that I could use it. And even when I use personal credit cards, I just use those for business. Right. So I don't, Julia yells at me if I don't. So, and I don't like to get yelled at. No, I'm just kidding. She's very nice. But, if you're needing to use personal credit cards, which a lot of people do when they first start out their business, you want to make sure that you're specifically using that card for business, and that card is what is attached, and you're not then, okay, let me go grocery shopping with that next week, and then let me go back and buy office supplies for my business. So it's okay to use personal funds, but don't commingle them in your account. Put them in your business account or use that personal credit card only for business expenses and don't mix them. Is that right, Julia?
Yes, yes, you're correct here. Yes, so that's that. And the last step would be to find out what your sales tax obligations are in your home state, if you're in the United States, because right now the law is constantly changing. Some marketplaces are collecting and remitting sales tax on your behalf. Some states would still require you to have to register for sales tax collection. Other states would say close your license if you're just selling on Amazon, for example. But if you're selling on Shopify, that's a different story, because Shopify does not remit sales tax on behalf of the seller. So it's kind of complicated. So you would need to do your research and find out what your sales tax obligations are from the very beginning, so that you don't get caught after that and get some.
And that's something else to consider as well when setting up your entity. So I know a lot of people, and we're not lawyers, and we recommend you go talk to a lawyer about that. Mm-hmm. But I get that question all the time: is, Amy, should I set up my entity in Wyoming? Because mm-hmm. Wherever you set it up, you need to do your research and find out what the tax implications are, because the last thing that you would want to happen is you're running along in your business and you're growing and everything is going good, and all of a sudden a state sends you a letter and says you owe us a good chunk of change, and you're like, what? I didn't even know about that. So yeah, definitely whatever state you choose to incorporate in, make sure you, as Julia says, that you know the tax laws and the sales tax requirements.
Yes.
Very good. So what steps should e-commerce, so we talked about when you're getting ready to start, but what about during their first year or two of business? So now we've gotten our first product out there, it's selling, we're in our first year or two of business. What now?
So what now is you would need to have some kind of system in place where you would track your numbers. That's very important, and a lot of sellers neglect that step for some reason. They either assume that marketplace is tracking it all for you, or it's all in your head. It can't be. So you need to put a system in place. So the general idea is to track your gross sales and your business expenses. So, and then the net would be what you keep in your pocket, the net sales. And you would need to also keep track of your inventory. That's very important, because it makes a direct impact on your taxes. If you're for example, some sellers would code all the inventory as cost of goods sold. Even if it's not sold yet, they would still code it as a cost of goods sold. So they technically reducing their income when it's really should be, that inventory should still be in the inventory and not in cost of goods sold, which is an expense. So I'm sorry to get into all this accounting detail, but
I was actually watching. I was actually watching the Profit the other day, and he was explaining with Marcus Lemonis, and he was explaining the importance of that, because I think that's called cost-based accounting, and the IRS does not like that. And he was saying what you're doing is you're saying that inventory is already sold, when in fact that's actually part of your asset list, or your what you could report as, hey, we haven't made this money yet, this money's tied up, and that could actually be better for your taxes in the long run. Am I tracking that correctly?
Yes. So that's very important in the first 2 years of business. So, but to start, when you are just starting, even going into the first 2 years, make sure you track your receipts as well, because your bank statements and your credit cards are not enough. It's not sufficient to just have those. In case you get an audit notice or something, they would need a receipt, the actual physical receipts for the expenses to support those expenses.
Yes,
So
I learned this the hard way when Julia, was fixing my tax returns and everything. She said, "Do you have receipts for all these things? Because if the IRS audits you, that's going to be a problem." And we hadn't been tracking our receipts. We were just like, "It's in QuickBooks. It's fine, right?"
mhm,
No, it's not fine.
no.
So what I use now is Airtable. Airtable has a really great expenses template, and you can put the Airtable app on your phone. And so it's very easy. When I'm on the go, I just take a picture of that receipt and put in the information and what the expense was for, and that enables Julia to be able to pull that receipt down and take a look at it. But for me, that's the easiest way to not have to like hang on to all this paper or lose it. As soon as I make the purchase, as soon as it happens, I take the picture with the app on my phone, and then it automatically gets uploaded to the Airtable. So that's my little trick for it. I know QuickBooks also has a way to upload receipts, but for those of you who are not as adept at QuickBooks, or you want an easier, free way to keep track of receipts, Airtable is a good option.
Amy, I just showed you the other trick that I just found out too. If you guys want to do this, looks like it's not on iPhone yet, which is weird, but on Android, there's actually a scan option now on Google Drive. So you pull up your Google Drive, you hit the plus button, and it'll say scan. You can have a folder in there that says like receipts, 2020, and then you just take a picture of it, and then it automatically goes into that folder. Done. It takes like 5 seconds. I've been using that for my wife and I are doing a house flip right now. So, we have stuff that when we go to the hardware store that we are expensing for that home flip. So we've been using that. It's been working really well. I'm going to start using it for all my businesses.
Yeah, that was a really good tip.
Yeah, definitely. More like a lot of my clients use that same Google Drive we use to exchange documents. I think, Amy, we also kind of started off that way, but you wanted to switch to Airtable. So, and it works, it's every client is different. So it works everybody for differently for everybody. But however you do it, you need to track your receipts. You need to try to put it all in one place, not all over the place. And even some receipts, if you have them in the email, just maybe save that email, print it into PDF, and upload it to whatever system you're using, and you can safely save that receipt for yourself in the future, because IRS doesn't come after you that same year. They would come after you 2-3 years from now. And then what you're going to do if you don't have those receipts? You're going to get disallowances, and you don't want that. That's the worst thing you can that can happen. So definitely keep receipts. Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other tips for the first year or two of business? I know something that you turned us on to was A2X software, which that software really helps take all of Amazon's charges and your inventory at the product sale level. And at first I was like, Julia, I don't have that many SKUs. I'm not like Andy over here with 800. I don't need to be paying another monthly amount. But then as soon as, she made a good argument for it, but as soon as I saw the level of detail and how much then we were able to translate that into, what we report to the IRS, that really, was again, a small price to pay. And it just breaks everything down, like all of your fees, the things that sometimes show up on one screen in a report on Amazon, it breaks it all down into like tiny little chunks. So then, you have your advertising and you've got every level of your product sale, your fees, all that kind of stuff, and it imports it into QuickBooks. So for those of you who haven't checked out A2X, that's another thing that we used in our first 1 to 2 years to get things on track at the recommendation of our accountant. So anything else for the first 2 years to keep people on track?
I would say another recommendation would be, if your business is growing fast, then definitely take a look at your business legal structure. If that's still valid, if it's still the most tax advantages for you, for your business, because maybe you started out with LLC, but down the road, maybe in a couple of years, you might want to change that and save yourself some money on taxes and get some other benefits if that's something, if your business dramatically changed over the past 2 years. So it
Oh,
depends.
that's a really good tip. Because you might be paying a bunch of freelancers right now through the 1099 method, and maybe you would be better off switching over to an S corp and W2ing yourself. I know there's a lot of really cool. I've been asking Julia, like, for Amazing at Home, like, can I write off my clothing that I wear to go do public speaking? And she's like, not as the entity that you would have to switch that to S corp and make that an employee benefit. So there's a lot of cool things you can do as you grow with different entities. So if you're running into problems where you're not able to write off certain things that you're like, but wait, that's for my business, that's not for personal, it might be a limitation of the type of entity. So talk with your accountant about that, and make sure that you're looking at your expenses and what the benefits would be if you swapped over.
Yep.
Very cool.
Julia, quick question on that. Sorry, Amy. So Julia, what I was wondering is, when we went to our accountant years ago, his justification, tell me if you agree with this, is that if you make more than $1 million a year, then the S corp makes more sense than an LLC. Is that true?
Generally,
or is that a hard and fast rule, or is that just like a starting point to like start looking at that?
I get this question a lot, and I would say it all depends on your particular situation. At $1 million in net profit, that S corp would probably make sense much more than LLC, definitely, I would say. But I will always recommend to do an analysis of comparison of different business legal entities and how much you would be paying in taxes as LLC, as S corp, C corp. So right now, it's just hard to say, and the law constantly changes. The last couple of years, the tax law changed again. The percentages changed. So yeah, it would all depend.
Looks like I'm going to have him reevaluate. See if it's still the best setup.
You might want, especially at that point, you would want to reevaluate more often than less.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's more costly to have. I know I was looking into that as well. And when I ran the numbers and everything as an S corp, I had a friend who was actually an accountant auditor run my numbers for me. And she explained, like, hey, there's a lot of people that she had worked with that had switched over to the S corp, and it was actually costing them more because they were just not ready to be there yet in their business. So it's why it's so important to have an awesome accounting professional. But yeah, I get that question a lot too. Like, what kind of entity should I form? And I always tell people, like, go talk to your lawyer and your accountant. That's what you should do. So speaking of accounting and systems and software, we talked about A2X, but are there any other systems or software tools you would recommend that people have in place for regular accounting and really keeping track of things once they grow beyond the spreadsheet?
Yes. So that's what I was gonna start kind of when you are just starting. It's okay to have your numbers on spreadsheets, but you will find that that's overwhelming very quickly. You'll outgrow that if your business keeps growing, and especially for the inventory tracking, it's really hard to track on the Excel spreadsheets. So what I would recommend, once you feel overwhelmed with Excel spreadsheets, go ahead and sign up for a formal accounting system such as QuickBooks Online or Xero. Now, I'm not affiliated with any of these softwares, just letting you know that something comes from the experience and what my clients use and what's most popular out there. So QuickBooks Online seems to be the most popular right now. It's a double entry accounting system, an official system where you would have your financial reports ready to be exported, profit and loss, your balance sheet, your statement of cash flows, and it would make sure that your transactions and your financial data is complete, rather than having yourself putting into Excel spreadsheet the transactions that you think are the transactions for your business. The QuickBooks would pull them automatically from your bank account or your credit cards, and all you would have to do is categorize it correctly and that would take care of completeness piece. At least you are
Yeah.
not missing anything. Sure.
I know, this was a big aha moment for me because I was doing QuickBooks incorrectly on my own in the beginning. And then when you took over bookkeeping for me and we have our monthly accounting meetings, it was such an aha moment to, you're walking me through my profit and loss and you're really helping me understand, oh, wow, that was my expenses. Oh, that's how much I spent on software. Oh, wow. Okay. That's how much revenue I made on this or that. So it was really cool to, doing it by myself. I didn't really get all of that data because I was incorrectly coding all of those things. So I had to learn that. But then after you started taking it over and really showing me how everything breaks down, we were able to see very quickly and easily, oh, wow, we need to work on that expense, or that's doing really well. That's a really good source of income for us or revenue for us. So it's really great to be able to see that number at the end of the month, and it kind of holds you accountable. But I love QuickBooks for that reason. And it's so easy because we can just connect our credit cards and our bank accounts, and it just automatically goes in there. And then those charges that you might not have remembered, maybe you forgot to take a picture of a receipt. And, if your bank account is connected, you say, what was that $35 charge? What happened there? Or the credit card, and you have to expense every single one of those things in QuickBooks. So it's really great to see like what's going on and where you're spending your money. And for me, I didn't really realize that until we had a bookkeeper. We grew large enough to actually have a bookkeeper take care of those things for us, because before that was tough doing it all on our own.
Yes, definitely. It's not easy. Yeah.
So anything else on systems or software that people should have in place?
Yes, so I wanted to mention that the inventory tracking part, I wouldn't use QuickBooks for that. I would recommend a separate tool for that. Usually, if you are selling on Amazon in North America, many businesses use Inventory Lab. That has been very useful for the businesses. But also, just wanted to mention that A2X actually has the cost of goods sold tracking built in right now. It's a relatively new feature, but you can do that as well if you're selling on Amazon or Shopify or both. You would be able to also have your cost of goods sold pulled automatically into your QuickBooks, and that would take care of that part. But you still need to make sure that your cost of goods sold are set up correctly, because if your inventory, if you're estimating your unit cost wrong, then your numbers will be wrong, obviously. So make sure that it's set up correctly. And you do need, for the A2X, you do need some basic accounting knowledge to set it up correctly, because I get a lot of clients coming in who have been using A2X, but it wasn't set up correctly. And sometimes even by their own bookkeeper, because the bookkeeper is not specializing in e-commerce, they don't really know the tool. So I would need to, I needed to kind of correct that, the setup, and then redo the A2X imports. But that's something to, to be on the lookout. Yeah. And another tool that I would recommend for sales tax is TaxJar. It's, one of the most popular tools right now that people are using. And there are other tools out there like Avalara, for example, but TaxJar, I would say, is the most popular. And you also need to kind of know what's going on with the sales tax situation, because TaxJar would give you some hints, would give you the numbers, but you still need to manually make sure that you're following, you're in compliance with all the states, and yeah, so.
Yeah, I want to follow up with what Amy was saying, which is knowing your numbers. I think that's a huge issue with so many entrepreneurs, especially e-commerce sellers. You're looking at your bank account, you're looking at your expenses, but you don't really know where the money's going. When you get a clear picture, you can really start, focusing more on profit. So, if you look, like Amy was saying, that you're paying, like for me, I pay tons of like I have 540 domain names. So that's a huge yearly expense. Now, to me, those are an investment. I'm like holding on to those because I know they're going to be worth lots of money, 5-10 years from now. But that's a huge expense. I'm able to now pull it up and see, like, is that an expense that number one, I'm willing to pay? Is it going to return? Or is it something that I should pair off? And you can do that for all different types of expenses. And really, I mean, by having that, having that information, those numbers, information that it's power in terms of, getting your business to profitability. So that was one of the things we were very slow on. And I wish that we would have, been the other way around, where we started being really obsessed with our numbers from the beginning, because we would have had a very different, journey. I mean, even back when, when I was doing my app business, we were making in, a great amount of money, but then not being smart with it. And, we would have been in a completely different place if we would have, had a little more idea of what we were spending on, how we were spending, all that. So knowing your numbers is powerful.
Definitely. Definitely. So those are some really great tips for software, A2X, QuickBooks. Inventory Lab is typically more of a software for people that do like online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, that just have a bunch of different brands and they're doing a lot of scanning and that kind of thing. So I would think A2X might be something better for somebody that's doing private label. However, maybe if you have a large number of SKUs in private label, Inventory Lab would also be very helpful for you. So great tips on that. Now we're going to get into documents and records. So when it comes time, and we are all preparing to do our taxes right now, we are all preparing. I get all nervous around tax time for some reason, probably because of my last 2 years tax returns. But we've got to prepare. So what should we do? What's our to-do list?
So you would need to, first of all, put together a list of your income and your expenses. So that would be a profit and loss. That would be either in your accounting system, if you have a system in place, or you would just need to put it all together manually yourself, basically, using your bank accounts, bank statements, your credit cards, and your Amazon summary report. So that would give you your gross sales. You would need to have your gross sales, your marketplace fees in place. You would have to have a list of all your expenses. And there are a lot of expenses that you can write off on your taxes. Just make sure that you're not missing any, because it will cost you extra money in taxes if you miss some of the expenses that you are entitled to. Some of the expenses I can mention, but that's not an exhaustive list. So if you are traveling, if you're purchasing your inventory, you can write off your car expenses. You can write off your office expenses, home office, office supplies, your shipping, your software, even your courses that you take to learn about this business as well. You can write that's deductible. Your utilities. So that's just to name a few. And of course, your Amazon marketplace fees, your payment processor fees as well, from your PayPal and so on. So once you have that in place, you can have it easily available if you're using some software tool, accounting software, such as QuickBooks. And if you're not, then put it all together yourself and give it to your tax preparer to prepare your taxes. In addition, you would need to have your balance sheet. The main part of your balance sheet, if you're just starting out or somewhere in the beginning, you would need to have your inventory. You would need to have your beginning inventory levels and your per unit costs. You would need to have your ending inventory and all your purchases that you had during the year and your cost of goods sold. So all those numbers you would need to have in order to prepare your tax return for the year. You would also need your 1099-K that would be available in your marketplace and your payment processor. So if you made over 20,000 in gross sales, you would need to log in into your marketplace and your payment processor and make sure that you pull those 1099s from every place where you're selling and where you're collecting some sales. So these days, don't wait for 1099 to come in the mail. Just be proactive, log in into your accounts and get those 1099s. If you are a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, your taxes will be reported on your personal taxes. So that's where the business taxes will be on your Schedule C of your personal tax return. So to prepare those taxes, you would need to also have all your personal documents ready to go. So W-2s if you have, any 1099s, any interest that you had. So any tax documents that you received for your on your personal side, you would need to also bring to your accountant, to your tax preparer in order to prepare your taxes. So that's about it.
So one of the biggest questions that people have, and I had this question when I was getting started, many of us run our businesses out of our home. And, you know, in general, the IRS doesn't always accept that a business could be as large. Like, for example, our house, like one living room in our Texas home is dedicated to warehousing. And some people have entire rooms that are dedicated to prepping, inventory, stuff like that right in their homes. And then we also have 2 office spaces because we're running 3 businesses out of our home. And then we have, you know, a lot of other space. So I think a lot of people don't realize that you can't write off 100%. So if you're working out of your home, and let's say your utility bill, for example, you do need that for your business, but you can write off 100% of a utility bill that is for your office outside of your home, right? If I go down the road and I rent an office, then if I'm paying the light bill at that office, that's 100% write-off. But if I'm splitting the utility bill of my home, it is only the percentage of my home that is to be used for business. In my case, 50% of my home is used for business every day. But as some accountants have pointed out to me, hey, you know, the IRS might question you on that. So you need to make sure that if you're claiming you're using 50% of your home, that you're not just like, okay, my kitchen is for, you know, but, you know, you need to make sure that you're actually using that solely for business and not, you know, like kind of a crossover. But remember that you can write off some of those things. So for example, in my case, I've got lawn care. I've got different types of things. I can write off 50% of those costs. Now, the other 50% have to go to my personal expenses. But when Julia recommends that you put aside and keep track of all the expenses, make sure you're taking in some of those things into consideration, such as your internet, your utilities, your water bill, you know, whatever kind of bills. If you use a portion of your home for business, it's that percentage of that expense that can be written off. So don't forget about those expenses, because that's really going to help your tax liability at the end of the year when it comes to tax time. Is that right, Julia?
Yes, you're correct. Yeah, absolutely.
And for some easy math for people, so correct me if I'm wrong, Julia, if you lived in 1,000 square foot, you know, apartment and 200 square feet of that was dedicated to your business, then you could write off 20% of, say, your internet bill, correct?
Yes, that's correct. There are a few different ways you can calculate your home office deductions, so it can get complicated. There is a simplified method to calculate that as well. If you don't want to use the actual expenses of your home, it's just after that it becomes whatever deduction is the highest for you, and that's where your accountant would be able to help you really to maximize your deduction, because there are different ways that you can write it off.
Yeah, in that case, for example, we keep track of our mileage as well as our gas, so that our fuel expenses, and then whichever one is more, then that's the one that we would be writing off. So make sure that you guys keep track of different aspects because you might have less tax liabilities in one case. So Jenny is watching our live stream right now, and she has a question. Now, she's in New Zealand, so you might not be able to answer this question, but we'll do our best. Jenny says, I have my first product going live in the next few months. Congratulations, Jenny. That's so exciting. New Zealand registered business, but do have an EIN from the IRS because the freight forwarder needed it. The confirmation letter says I need to file Form 1120F by 15 July. Do you know what happens for a New Zealand business in this instance? So it looks like she has a US-based EIN, but now she's getting the letter saying you need to file this 1120F.
Okay, so she would need to file the 1120. But she wouldn't be paying any taxes because her business was not based in America. So she would need to file that special form. And I don't remember exactly the number of the form, but there is a form that you file that we would need to file for a foreign entity, even though she has the US-based EIN, she wouldn't have to pay any taxes on it. So that's a very simple form to do.
Got it. So the reason you're still filing the form is so that later on you don't get a tax bill that if you had just filed a form and said, nope, we're not a US-based entity, we're a foreign entity.
Yes.
And then they can put you in that pile and then they're not going to send you the bill later, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Andy, I think you're next.
You're right. So Julia, what are the most common accounting and tax mistakes that e-commerce sellers make, and some tips maybe to try to avoid them? I know we've already talked about that a little bit.
So the first mistake that I noticed, most common mistake, is when the business, when the seller is assuming that the marketplace is tracking everything for them. So they can just log in into their Amazon account and they have their numbers right there. They're wrong because they're not tracking all the other expenses. In the end, they don't have a system in place to have, to know whether their business is making money or losing money, because not all the expenses are accounted for. And they think they know their numbers, but all they know is what Amazon is showing them their payouts are, and that's not the accurate picture of their business. So to avoid that, set up a system, set up an accounting system. Now, another mistake is assuming that you can do it all. So some people like to do it themselves, and they would set up their system, they do some research, they do some learning how to do the accounting themselves, and they set it up. But it turns out to be incorrect, so they cannot rely on those numbers. And unfortunately, sometimes it happens that they find out that when it's a little bit too late, when they are so much into the game, they spend thousands and thousands of dollars into this business, and they didn't know that they were actually losing money because they don't see the correct picture in their numbers because the system was not set up correctly. So it becomes very time consuming for them after a while, even if they do it correctly. But most of the time, there is always something about the setup that needs to be corrected, unless it's done by a professional accountant or somebody who knows e-commerce. So that brings a lot of cleanup work for me. Sometimes some of these businesses would just still insist that they've been doing it correctly, but once I get into their books, I notice tons of mistakes. And some of those mistakes would be like recording their sales, their payouts in the bank as sales, which is incorrect. And it's actually just a payout. Your gross sales are the sales that you had, and then the Amazon fees get deducted and the net gets deposited into your account. So you need to make sure you recorded that correctly, because at the end of the year, when you get your 1099K and it doesn't match your QuickBooks sales, you would be wondering why it's so much higher. And that's why. That's one of the most common mistakes that do-it-yourself sellers make. Also, a lot of sellers are not keeping receipts. We talked about it already. It's very important to keep the receipts. And inventory, that's a big part of, of mistakes and corrections that we need to make. If you're not setting it up correctly from the beginning, you're not estimating or you're not calculating your inventory unit costs correctly, that throws off the numbers as well. So try to avoid those mistakes by maybe consulting with a professional, making sure that you're keeping, even if you do it yourself, you set up correctly and check in with your accountant once in a while to make sure everything is run properly.
So I just thought about something because this has been changing a lot. Can you just explain a little bit about the sales tax? There's been a lot of changes going on, and so there's marketplace facilitating laws now in a lot of states. Can you explain the difference between a state that's doing that and states that are still doing it the old-fashioned way?
Okay, so there are states that are participating, that passed that law for marketplace facilitator law. And those states, if you are only selling on Amazon, most of those states would allow you to deregister, and Amazon would just take care of the sales tax for you. It will automatically collect sales tax and remit it to the states on your behalf. There are a few states, such as Florida, for example. They are still not participating in marketplace facilitator laws, so they are not. They are in works for that, but there are a few states like that are still the old-fashioned way. So what you need to do is you're supposed to, if you have inventory as an FBA seller, for example, you have inventory stored in those states, you would need to register for a sales tax license there and collect and remit sales tax on behalf of the seller. So you would, that's for the old-fashioned way states, but more and more states are joining this marketplace facilitator law, and hopefully soon we will not have to take care of do this manual anymore. But if you are not selling just on Amazon, if you're selling on other platforms such as Shopify, then it's a completely different story. Even if you're in the state that is within that marketplace facilitator law where it's passed, you would need to be registered, you would need to collect and remit sales tax manually, and then it becomes a little bit more complicated when you remit your sales tax to those states. If you're selling on other. But eBay also joined the marketplace facilitator, so those who sell on Amazon and eBay are good to go.
Yeah, I'm just mad at the states who continue to do to not participate, because I mean that's been one of the biggest frustrations ever in terms of selling on Amazon, selling online. In Europe they have the VAT, right, and it kind of goes across borders and things. It's so much easier. But I'm glad they're finally starting to make inroads there, but it's still frustrating that in 2020 we're still having to deal with all that. But cool, awesome, thanks, a lot of good insight there. All right, Julia, I think we are done grilling you, unless Amy, did you have any follow-up questions? I don't think so. How can people get in touch with you, Julia? How can they reach out if they want to work with you, or even just take a call and so you can kind of share with them how you can bring value to their business?
So if you need my help with getting your financial clarity with your situation, and if you need to discuss some strategies, how to save the money on taxes, and if you want to make sure you're in compliance with all the regulations, you can either send me a message, a Facebook message. You can find me on my business on Facebook, Julia Ibrahim CPA. and send me a message. Or you can, on my page, you can also book a call with me. There are some links there that you can schedule a call with me as well. And I'll be happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, definitely. And we'll include those links in the show notes as well. And, you know, it's just been wonderful. I know accounting is something that people just really struggle with. It's a scary thing when you're first starting your business. It can be even scarier if you grow too fast and you haven't had things set up properly. So we just thank you so much for the awesome tips that you gave our users today to be successful in their businesses.
Thank you for this opportunity to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening. And if you haven't done so yet, we really hope and request that you subscribe to the podcast, share it with somebody who you think is going to get some value out of it. And of course, if you give us a review and a star rating, we also appreciate that. We actually just got one of the few negative reviews we've ever got. And even though it sucks getting a negative review, it's still great to get that feedback from you guys to see how we're doing. So we really appreciate that. No matter what it is, it's great to get that feedback so we can try to do better for you guys. We really, really appreciate you guys joining us. And we will see you guys next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're done recording and I will kill the live feed. Thank you guys who watched live. We appreciate it.